Of course, I've given talks before, but this is the first time that I've ever given a talk at Celebrate Life. So this is a new one for me. Oh, thank you, James. And a lot of the talks have to do with spiritualism aspects of it, like the laws of nature, grief, happiness, things like that. But the talk that I'm going to give today is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to have a lot of things in it. It's about the Challenger tragedy. It's like you would think that would not be a very appropriate topic, but it turns out it really is. So, first of all, do all of you remember the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster? It's like I definitely remember that. That happened back in January of 1986, and this coming January, that'll be 36 years that happened. I remember on that morning that it was due to launch, and I wanted to watch it on TV. So before I went off to work, I turned on the TV, and I'm sitting there waiting for it like everybody else, and there's another delay. If anybody remembers, this launch has been delayed several times before. It's like, here it is again. It's like, oh no. It's like they're not going to launch. So I turned off the TV and I went to work. When I arrived at work, people started telling me that the shuttle blew up. And at first I thought it was a joke. I didn't realize that it had actually happened. When I got home, I watched the news, and there was one report that suggested that there was evidence to support some of the astronauts survived the initial explosion. I thought how terrible that must have been to have to wait for 3 minutes as you're falling out of the sky to hit the ocean, being alive, being aware of this. Then there was a news blackout, and we never heard another thing about it. 33 years later, I was to learn what that evidence was. The Foundation of Mind-Bending Research held a lecture a couple of years ago on the subject of those shuttle astronauts. Two psychics, Jean Love and Regina Ochoa, were in contact with the crew after they became spirits. Over the course of 2 years, they communicated and pieced together what happened that fateful day. Krista McAfee was a school teacher that went up with the astronauts, was enduring the pressures of G-force when there was a hard bang. She began screaming along with the rest of the crew, unaware that she had already left her body, and in that moment of confusion, realized that she must be dead. The whole crew was together when they had all finally crossed over. They didn't know what to do next when they were whisked away and brought into the presence of Jean, the medium. It happened that fast. Krista was completely distraught and inconsolable as she realized she was dead and would never, ever see her family again. When Krista appeared to Jean the second time, she was much more in control, but would not be able to talk much about the accident until she had processed it further. When Jean asked her why Krista had chosen her as a psychic contact, she explained she didn't have a choice. It just happened, but now understands that she and Jean had established a bond on the other side, so she was the natural choice. Astronaut Jarvis was aware that there was other psychics trying to contact them, but the crew, now in spirit, couldn't get through to those psychics because they were being monitored by the government. It turns out that each shuttle mission has one astronaut assigned to communicate with the government's psychics in the event regular communications fail. None of the other astronauts know who it is. This is part of what is known as the Montauk Project, a secret government organization that experiments with psychic abilities. Both mediums, Jean and Regina, were excited to share this newfound relationship with the government. That was a mistake. The government wanted them to cease their sessions as it was embarrassing to the government, like giving the shuttle mission a go when that freezing morning was compromising the shuttle's integrity. Jean and Regina refused to stop, so the Montauk Project targeted them with psychic and psychological harassment. Jean and Regina don't want to go into the details, but the results were a family illness, separation of family members, a divorce, and a death. Regina says she was shot at during one of her classes and everyone scattered, but she was pinned down in the classroom. When it was over, she went home and told her husband, who didn't believe her. The next day, they went back to the classroom, and he believed her after he saw all the bullet holes in the wall. At that moment, she realized she never heard the gunfire. They had been using silencers. So imagine, who uses silencers? Over the course of the 2 years, the information discovered included that not all the astronauts died in the explosion because the shuttle was blown clear. Some died on impact with the ocean and others drowned. Recovery people found 3 life support backpacks that had been turned on, which must be done manually. If you read the statements by NASA, it says that all the shuttle crew died after the explosion, which is worded vaguely. Other evidence of their survival were voice recordings after the explosion, but those tapes were destroyed deliberately, I assume to avoid embarrassment of NASA. It turns out there were other reasons. Not only were the tapes destroyed, but all the computer data that was being recorded after the explosion. It was a cover-up, so no one would know just how fragile the space shuttle was. At that time, President Ronald Reagan had green-lighted the Star Wars program, which was basically arming space. The astronauts did not know it at the time, but part of their payload included military nuclear weapons for space. On that morning of the launch, Lockheed would not give a green light because they knew the O-rings were frozen. But Reagan pressured them by denying them any more funding if they didn't give a thumbs up. So they did. NASA had launched a shuttle before with this condition, and nothing bad happened, but this was the coldest morning they had ever experienced. In analysis after the explosion, it was determined there was a wind shear of up to 200 miles per hour that forced the sides of the rocket boosters to flex. And because the O-ring was frozen, it did not flex. There was a gap for flammable gases to escape. This was the focus of NASA, so no one would know the rest. The condition of the engines after so many launches had become so distressed that it had created malfunctions that cascaded to the explosion because of the O-rings. Had the explosion not occurred, the mission would have failed anyway. The biggest reason the astronaut spirits wanted to communicate was to prove that there is existence after death. Now, I'm pretty sure I've heard that somewhere else before, but I can't remember where. Originally, they wanted to pass on messages that would change the way government operates and stop these negative intents, but over time realized they would not be able to do that. Krista communicated that from her new vantage point on the other side, she sees we made a mistake by separating church and state. The church has not really been about God. God does not live at church. As a teacher, if she were able to come back in another body, she would teach the children about God. But she wanted it to be clear that she was not crazy about doing that right now. In an interesting situation with the shuttle crew, another interesting situation with the shuttle crew is they have been kept grounded to the earth plane, even though they are now in spirit. This is not normal. As an example, I've read a story about a near-death experience. A husband and wife died in a car crash. The husband was suddenly aware he was in spirit and could see his wife, who was concerned when she said, "You aren't supposed to be here." Shortly thereafter, he returned to his body. The wife was aware of what was happening because as soon as she crossed over, she was getting infused with the memories of her spirit, while her husband was clueless as to what was happening because it wasn't his time, and so he was not getting that knowledge. When we die, our minds begin to expand to the new reality of the spirit world. We have access to the knowledge of spirit, and there are many teachers along the way ready to guide us. With this crew, that awareness had been muted. They were not privy to all the help one normally receives because their guides know that this communication is important and the astronauts must keep their identities and personalities intact so the progression of their spiritual knowledge was diminished. When we die, all the trappings of earthly life disappear, and we change our perspective on things. A spirit who has lived in the spirit world a long time does not have the same caring compassion for earth problems because they know it's temporary, and so not a big deal. Also, they are elevated to a higher frequency dimension, which makes it harder to contact mediums. Krista reminds us that this is what the crew chose to do for the betterment of mankind. Because the crew remained attached somewhat to their earthly incarnations, they were very angry at what had happened, not to just themselves, but what was going on at NASA to cover up their mistakes. In time, that would change. Jean and Regina did notice that over the 2 years of communications, the astronauts changed their perspective and became more spiritual. In the beginning, the astronauts were angry at the government's choice to launch, risking their lives. Over time, they began to deal with the higher spiritual message and lessons. Commander Scobie, that led the shuttle mission, attempted to describe this newfound reality as the real world, and Earth life is not. I've heard this description before from other mediums. They are real, and we are the ghosts in their world. Visualizing the healing of oneself is more effective over there. The crew is assisted with angels, guides, and teachers. For Scobie, his experience was being pulled out of the explosion by an angel. For a time, he was angry at what had happened, but as time went on, he began to relax, and he started to connect, and confusion was replaced with wonder. When reviewing the accident, he saw the space shuttle was surrounded by spirits, including Gus Grissom, an astronaut that died in the first Apollo mission, and angels even before the launch. They knew what was coming. In fact, it goes farther than that. It goes back farther than that. Astronaut Jarvis was supposed to fly on another mission, but was scrubbed out twice so that he would be part of this crew. That a teacher was part of the crew was deliberate. It brought the public closer to the tragedy. The disaster happened in our faces and would not have been as impactful had it happened out in space. So the tragedy was intended to bring the attention of the public to the message that there is life after death, even though the crew didn't know it at that time. I could end this talk here, but there is one aspect of the topic I need to bring up, which may be hard to believe, and that is the involvement of extraterrestrials. Commander Scobie revealed that one of the shuttle missions was top secret. Normally, NASA welcomes the public of its launches, but this one was not covered. NASA announced that a shuttle had already been launched. The mission dealt with conducting experiments for the Pentagon in dealing with UFOs. As Scobie said, you can believe it or not, but the Pentagon and the Air Force have documents 3 feet thick on the results of those experiments that involved other dimensions and contact. The crew of that mission wouldn't talk about it because they wanted to keep their jobs. In the transcripts of the mediumship sessions, the crew described that as spirits, they can't go to the filing cabinet and pull open a drawer. Instead, they can meld with the papers and be able to extract information that way. As to the computer data, melding would not work, as they would only be exposed to meaningless ones and zeros. They needed the computer to decipher the computer bits, but they are in spirit. They instead focused on giving the operators the desire to want to pull up the data on the screens, and then the spirit world could see the data. In the lecture I attended, it had been suggested that the ETs have been in communication with the governments of the world and stated that they will not allow any weapons of mass destruction in space. So they were instrumental in this mission failing. If you do the research, you will find we have a history of strange UFO encounters that have thwarted military attempts to weaponize space. I have a friend who says that he was introduced to a few ETs, and he is not worried about North Korea launching nukes at us. The ETs won't allow it. If you would like to view the transcripts, you can go to a website called www.challengercc, that's the letters cc.org, where the first 2 years of research exist. The work continues even to this day, but that is what is available online. I would like to caution you if you go ahead and take a look at those transcripts, because they transcribed every little detail. So there's a lot of dialogue that goes between the people that have nothing to do with the meaty information that we want, but it's all there. So you have to filter through it all. And I remember in one of the transcripts, Krista comes through and she's asking about one of the people that is normally in the group. It's like, where's Jeff? And they said, well, he went to the bathroom. And then she replies, oh, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. So we don't have to worry about going to the bathroom once we cross over. And that's it for my talk. So thank you.